I've thought a lot about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, meritocracy, the Protestant work ethic, and Kyriarchy, and noticed quite a bit of overlap amongst the latter three concepts, and how the first is supposed to combat them all. Let's start with the backlash against DEI programs and DEI as a concept. The backlash against DEI and the push towards meritocracy and continued emphasis on the Protestant work ethic are combined ways to uphold the status quo, if not turn the clock back to the so-called good old days when everyone supposedly knew their place. And combining the backlash against DEI, the push towards meritocracy, and the emphasis on the Protestant work ethic is a way for those in power to blame people in Kyriarchal society for the misfortunes they've been subjected to, mostly by way of accusing them of being lazy. Behind this attitude is the idea that anyone, regardless of their circumstances, can make it in the society they live in. In the FT.com article, Can Businesses Ever Run a True Meritocracy? When Trump outlawed DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, part of his justification was that some schemes were antithetical to people getting ahead on the basis of their own ability. DEI, he said, diminished the importance of individual merit, aptitude, hard work, and determination when selecting people for jobs and services. But the pursuit of a meritocracy requires transparency and effort from employers and can risk returning to old biases. And considering Trump was born into wealth and seeing what we have of his own personal and business history, his own merit, aptitude, and ability are somewhere between questionable and dubious. And he's no doubt never seen a day's work, honest or otherwise, in his life. This is pretty rich. But as the FT.com article states, if organizations are to be genuinely meritocratic while also encouraging a diverse staff base, employers will need to make career progression explicit and open rather than relying on informal sponsorship and favoritism. The concept of meritocracy sprang from that of the Protestant work ethic, which espouses that work in itself is moral and no one deserves anything good if they don't do what Kyriarchal capitalist society considers worthwhile work. Read, work that makes money for those who already have the means to help themselves. Springing from the idea of the Protestant work ethic is the Horatio Alger myth, which perpetuates the idea that anyone, regardless of their circumstances, can move up the socioeconomic ladder through hard work, honesty, and perseverance, and thus feeds into capitalism, and like the idea of meritocracy, sweeps under the rug all of the systemic barriers so many people face. The Protestant work ethic, the Horatio Alger myth, and the principle of meritocracy are all cut from the same cloth, whereas DEI opposes this triad, or does so in principle. But let's face it, the word merit, as it's defined by those in power, is subjective, even if they obfuscate it, and meritocracy is a way for the powers that be to uphold the status quo and convince themselves that society is equal and thus stay comfortable. In other words, the push towards meritocracy is a way for people with power and privilege to have their cake and eat it too. Now on to the concept of Kyriarchy. Theologian Elizabeth Schussler Fiorenza coined the term Kyriarchy in her 1992 book, But She Said, Feminist Practices of Biblical Interpretation, and defines it as a neologism derived from the Greek words for Lord or Master, Kyrios, and to rule or dominate, Archean, which seeks to redefine the analytic category of patriarchy in terms of multiplicative, intersecting structures of domination. Kyriarchy is best theorized as a complex pyramidal system of intersecting multiplicative social structures of superordination and subordination, of ruling and oppression. Kyriarchy is the best term to describe all of the hierarchies in society right now: patriarchy, white supremacy, cis heteronormativity, classism, ableism, etc., and how those hierarchies operate, cooperate, and interlock, chiefly by making it easy for those in power to divide different groups of people and pit them against each other, while keeping them from advancing in society, so they don't come together to challenge the status quo and view those who do issue such challenges in derogatory ways, and even as enemies of the people as well as the state. And now we get to ordinary people. Starting from childhood, we're taught that Kyriarchy and all it entails, including the concept of meritocracy, the emphasis on the Protestant work ethic, and the uneven playing field, is normal and just the way it is. One purpose of school is to prepare kids for a future of serving the not so great capitalist machine in whatever ways they are able to. And we're told we're bad people if we don't participate and actively in capitalism. As they're stated, DEI and similar initiatives aim to disrupt this way of thinking and the system it supports. It bears repeating that one way the powers that be exercise their power is through language and manipulation thereof. People in power define terms in ways that suit themselves and their respective agendas, and pass that information down in expectation that everyone at all levels of Kyriarchal society will adopt and internalize the definitions and, by extension, the overall agenda. As the article on medium.com titled Language as a Weapon of Control points out, they don't see the bars of the cage because they were taught that the cage is normal, which could also explain the backlash against DEI and other such programs. We are taught that the status quo is normal and thus to fear change, especially if said change benefits anyone who doesn't have power. We are taught to conflate ourselves and our identities with those in power, that we have more in common with the powerful than we do with those on our respective socioeconomic levels. The thing is, capitalism requires people to perform menial, low-paying labor to keep the wealthy wealthy and the system chugging along, even if those in power and their enablers blame the people at the bottom for their inability to move up the socioeconomic ladder, and even to get by. And under capitalism, those who get the most financial and other material gains are not those who work the longest and the hardest, but those who own the means of production. And most of those folks work very little, if at all. Capitalism also requires people, chiefly women, to perform unpaid, mostly domestic labor, to keep homes and, by extension, the wheels of the system in motion. In other words, capitalism needs hierarchy to survive, and Kyriarchy is every hierarchy ever invented, interlinking and overlapping.